morning, everyone. On behalf of Foundation Scotland, delighted to have worked with the Council to organise this seminar, and our thanks to them for responding positively to our approach to do this event together. This is our third, like James said, our third seminar. First was in 2012 in Highland in Strathclyde, and last year we were in Dumfries. And both brought together a similarly wide range of experiences I know we have in the room today. We'll run future events like this in other parts of Scotland because the feedback is suggesting that people really value the opportunity to discuss and debate some of the thorny issues around community funds, particularly if there's quite a mixed bunch of folk around the table: developers, local authority, community councillors, development trust bodies. It's quite rare that you can get that blend of people in one space. I want to give you some headlines in the next few minutes about Foundation Scotland's work with community funds, which is all focused on driving up good practice to achieve impact for communities. Just briefly, for those of you who may be less familiar with Foundation Scotland, we're an independent registered charity distributing funds for over 250 individual families, charitable trusts, companies and public bodies. So the range of folk whose funds we distribute are pretty broad. The funding that we distribute, it reaches across all of Scotland's 32 local authorities, and it's a mix of grassroots, small grant making and larger donations and investments, distributing between £6 to £7 million annually. In the community benefit arena, we work with over 25 developers across upwards of over 80 communities, and we're involved and have been involved in establishing or administering around 34 plus community funds to date of varying scales and complexities, which we reckon amounts to over a third of established community funds in Scotland currently. So our footprint is quite large, but it's been very different in different places. Sometimes it's quite light, and sometimes it's heavier. And if you're wondering about the logo in the middle there, any guesses? What client that might be? Go on, someone be brave. The people one, who's that? Go on, someone go for it. What client is that?
Investors in people.
Say again?
Investors in people.
Investors in people. One more?
People's Lottery.
Yeah, no, actually I couldn't find anything else, and the word client is a bit obscure, isn't it? But they're communities. So increasingly communities are coming to us not via a developer and or not via a local authority, but saying, this is our story, can you work with us on this bit of it? So we would see communities not just as bodies that receive funds. They're in a much more central place. So they're having almost centre stage on our slide there, and may they shift to the centre really as the years pass, as the years go on. Our work on community funds and community benefit rather falls into three broad areas. And I'm just going to say a piece about the area of facilitating dialogue, managing funds, and promoting sharing approaches and learning. In your packs, there's this sheet which highlights funds that are in development or ones that we're managing at the moment. But we, as well as that, we work on a range of specific assignments on various aspects of community engagement, fund development, implementation or review. One example of this is a piece of work we did last year on behalf of RWE Energy, and I'm delighted Katie's with us today and she'll speak shortly. The Caithness conversation was a structured piece of conversation really, with a whole range of individuals, groups and businesses in Caithness. And the key question was very simple, and it was about how can the current funds and the pipeline of funds coming into that very windy part of Scotland, how can they achieve greater impact? The outcome from that work was a shared intention to make funds more available across the wider piece of Caithness, rather than just being tightly, geographically defined. And we're continuing a conversation now about how that can be done, by who and when. But the basic buy-in was to a community-led Caithness-wide fund. So we'll watch this space and watch the Caithness space and see how that unfolds. The second strand of our work, managing and administering funds in partnership with communities, is a core area of expertise, and it keeps us very close to the ground about what I call the nitty-gritty of fund management, and a lot of it is really nitty-gritty. Our approach is primarily developmental and flexible, and we walk and work alongside communities as they often learn on the job with this new opportunity and deal with what we feel often and see often and know from other communities where we ourselves live, that the combination of people and money can be quite explosive. So we're close to that reality, and we don't shy away from the challenge that comes with that. A few aspects I want to highlight about our work. We create different arrangements for funds in partnership with communities and developments, and those arrangements are influenced by size, scale and geography. But with the landscape becoming increasingly busy, literally, what's the optimum way to disperse a single fund across multiple communities? Or what's the optimum way to disperse multiple funds within a single community? That's one of the many questions communities, developers, local authorities are challenged with. Our bread and butter is very much about grappling with that complexity and adapting some of our tools and processes and innovating all the time to achieve best fit to local scenarios. And I use the word innovating confidently and with excitement, because we call this the policy context, this session. Yes, it's the policy context. Actually, when push comes to shove, these community funds are in our gift, and I mean the gift of folk in this room, to create the best fit for their communities. Politicians, with all due respect, and intermediaries, with all due respect, like Foundation Scotland, and communities themselves, can declare whatever they wish to. But actually, at the end of the day, we don't yet, and maybe never, may I hasten to add, have a regulator who is regulating us. I don't want to say that accountability is not important, it is critical, but actually the policy context is evolving, and we're all part of making that happen. A second key thing about how we work is we don't make any decisions about how funds are spent. So whilst you have that list of funds that we work with communities on, we're not decision makers about those funds. The decision makers are community members themselves, and Tom will share a little bit more about that when he has an opportunity. Third strand of our work is around something we feel increasingly passionate about, and that's this kind of thing. Working on community benefit funds can be a lonely and all-consuming job for lots of volunteers working hard in their communities, often feeling increasingly isolated about particular aspects of getting a fund going, or a conversation with a developer, or a conversation with a local authority. Most of you will know the stresses and strains involved, but others have been there and had their fingers burnt, or brokered different kinds of arrangements to the one you might be familiar with. So primarily we try and bring people together to share practice and experience through events like this and others. And we seek to use that experience to influence discussion and debate amongst politicians or within local authorities and or within third sector organisations. So we, along with some others in this room, were able to contribute to the good practice principles that Audrey just shared, and that was published in the spring. And we've also facilitated the UK's first community-led charter on community benefit that I'll share a bit more on shortly. If there's one thing that I will always take the opportunity opportunity to emphasise. It's that these funds are indeed a unique resource for communities to drive their own development. There are few examples globally where communities have not only had the plans, or the energy, or the activists, but they've also had the money. I mean, that is a pretty unique combination. And they've arrived into the social and economic fabric of communities when that fabric is, more often than not, increasingly reliant on the energy and commitment of local people to make things happen and drive meaningful development. But that doesn't mean it has to be business as usual. These funds, I would suggest, are inherently different because the decision-making can be, it isn't always, but the decision-making can be very, very localised. In meeting that challenge, we'd suggest that community funds don't need to try and replicate what we suggest are some of the inadequacies of the current funding system. They don't need to do that. Although that's often all we know, these funds don't need to operate in that kind of way, and hence, hopefully, some of what's on that slide makes sense to some of you. However, they should operate, we would argue, with transparency and some fundamentals about good governance that I was delighted to see Audrey also reflected on a few minutes ago. We know that funds can achieve this kind of impact. These pictures illustrate some examples from some funds which supplied, as it were, by SSE. Do you supply funds? Does a developer supply a fund? I've just thought of that. Katie, Graham, do you supply funds? Provide. Thank you. Funds provided by developers, where investment from a community fund is contributing to an initiative that's designed to be transformational anyway. So the thinking has, as it were, already been done, and it's addressing some underlying need, be that around population decline, job creation, or enhancing the local economy. And of course, in that process, creating lots of wealth of social capital. So we have, in the top right-hand corner, we have a community-run shop in Perth and Kinross, Curtin Michael community shop. In the middle, we have the Bute Cinema in Aberfeldy, community-run cinema. The bottom right-hand corner, we've got housing development, Dumfries and Galloway, where the community fund has been able to invest in some affordable housing. On the left, we have the Crook Inn in the Borders, again, community-run facility. And the top left, we have an apprenticeship scheme, which the fund invested in quite strategically. 120,000 was earmarked to ensure that approximately 6-7 young people were provided with apprenticeship opportunities. So yes, these funds can be a unique resource, but we know as well that they can also cause harm, and at their worst, money is not spent and the community is not aware of that resource. And at their best, through a local fund, at their best, a local fund is flexible, accountable, dynamic and relevant. But we know that achieving the kind of outcomes that you just saw on the previous slide doesn't happen overnight. Our experience suggests that in order to maximise that kind of impact, communities do often need some level of support. Not always, but often they need some level of support. And Foundation Scotland works in partnerships with communities to ensure that they're in the driving seat about what that strategy might be. But we find that the nature of that support is quite critical. And actually finding a way to get quite involved with the community is quite important, which is why we have now regional staff across Scotland rather than, and perception is all, rather than just being seen as a kind of central belt based funder. So how you provide the developmental support we think is critical, and we think the story is still unfolding on that. There's a slide on the legacy, the opportunity and challenge that we believe is being provided by these funds. I'll skip over that, but can talk more about that over coffee, because I just want to finish with a piece of work that was done recently by, spearheaded by 14 community members from across Scotland, representation from Argyll, from Caithness, Borders, 14 community reps met over a series of roundtable discussions, and they were sharing their thoughts and experiences about community funds, and they realised that whilst there is guidance and toolkits written by good people, like ourselves often, telling communities what they should be doing and how, there was actually nothing written by communities themselves on these community funds. So they decided to try and set out some basic standards and principles around good practice to share with other communities and other stakeholders. And the result, on your tables you'll see, you've got the summary in your pack, and there are a couple of copies on the table and on our table in the marketplace. The result's the UK's first community-led charter on community benefit, and we're now promoting that to raise awareness, share experience and drive up good practice. These are the key areas that it covers, and in that process of developing that document, we talked with the Scottish Government, we talked with COSLA, we talked with Local Energy Scotland, and they were also all involved in that discussions. So although it's the result of 500 plus hours of volunteer time, it's definitely not been developed in isolation. And if there's one thing I would like to leave you with from today, other than the hopefully abundant conversations that you are going to have with other folk here, please do look at that charter and please tear it apart, do what you want with it, but share it round and let other folk who are interested in community funds and trying to grapple and work with them, let them know it's available. Thank you.